Good evening. I think the last time I was up here, I spoke for about 45 minutes, and I looked at the clock on the back, and it said 11:30, and I thought the clock was wrong, but it was actually very right. I narrowed it down so I wasn't wearing my watch that day, so I've got my watch on today, and I probably won't look at it for the entirety of my devotional. Um, the topic that I was looking at for this evening is enduring faith. And if you do want to follow with me, we'll be exploring the book of James a bit tonight, amongst other verses. So yeah, let's get into it. So, you know that feeling when you've got a band-aid or a plaster that you need to rip off, and you're basically dreading the moment. We hesitate. We try to peel it off slowly. If you've got hairy arms or legs like me, you try and pluck each hair off individually. And we try to do everything we can to soften the sting. But eventually it has to come off. And once it does, we realize it actually wasn't as bad as what we thought it was. Life often feels the same. There are moments of pain, loss, or disappointment that we just want over as quickly as possible. We pray, Lord, take it away. We look for shortcuts, we look for relief, we look for the fastest way out. But James offers a perspective completely different from the world around us. He tells us that our trials are not meaningless interruptions, they are instruments in the hands of God. They are the very tools he uses to grow us into maturity. We're going to start off by reading from James chapter 1, and we're just going to read verses 2 through to 4. And it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." James begins this letter with a very bold statement. He says, "Consider it pure joy." He's not saying that suffering itself is joyful. He's not calling us to enjoy pain or pretend it doesn't hurt. What he's saying is this: as believers, we have a perspective that allows us to look beyond the pain to the purpose. James says that trials test our faith. The word test doesn't mean that God is trying to trap us or cause us to stumble. It's the word for refining. Like gold going into fire. The impurities get burnt away so that only what is pure remains. Now the fire is hot, but it proves the gold. In the same way, trials are painful, but they reveal the reality of our faith. They expose whether our faith is shallow or genuine, whether it is built on convenience or on conviction. And Paul goes on to echo this truth in Romans chapter 5, verse 3 to 4, which says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." Perseverance, character, hope. These are not produced in comfort. Think of when you're exercising. If you're going to look at a weight that's on the floor, are you going to grow muscles? No. Muscles only grow when they are pushed against resistance. If you lift nothing, you gain nothing. In the same way, faith grows when it is tested. Without resistance, it remains weak. That's why James calls us to let perseverance finish its work. If we try to run from every difficulty, if we look for a quick escape every time God brings us into a trial, we interrupt the very process he's using to make us strong. Let's look at Joseph quickly. As a young man, he had dreams of greatness, but his life quickly unraveled. He was betrayed by his brothers, he was sold into slavery, he was falsely accused, he was thrown into prison, and forgotten by all those who helped him. From the outside, it seems like one tragedy after another. But in every trial, God was shaping Joseph into the man who would one day stand before Pharaoh and lead a nation. Without those years of testing or trials, he would not have had the strength of character to handle that responsibility. Another example is David, anointed as king while still a shepherd boy, but what followed? Years of being hunted by Saul, hiding in caves, fleeing for his life. Those wilderness years were not wasted. God was shaping David's faith and dependence on him before placing him on the throne. Now, to us, trials, they can often feel like detours. But in God's plan, it's the road to maturity. James goes on to say in verse 12, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Every trial that we endure faithfully is preparing us for blessing. It shapes us for today and prepares us for eternity. And James tells us the reward is the crown of life, the eternal blessing that God promises to those who love him. Later in the letter, James circles back to this theme. In chapter 1, he tells us trials produce perseverance. And then in chapter 5, he reminds us that perseverance requires patience. If we read James chapter 5, verse 7 and 8, it says, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." Now the farmer works hard. He plows, plants, waters, and tends to the crop. But there is one thing he cannot do. He cannot make the rain fall. He waits for what only God can provide. That is patience. It is active faith, doing what we can while trusting God with what only he can do. Patience means acknowledging that I am not in control, but God is. It means trusting his timing, even when his timing may feel slow. Now, this kind of patience is often harder than endurance. When we endure pain for a short while, we know the finish line is usually close. But James calls us to patience until the Lord's coming. That could mean a lifetime of waiting and trusting. And yet that is the call of the Christian life. Hebrews describes our patience as running a race. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, it says as follows, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Even Jesus endured suffering with patience, but he endured it because he saw the joy on the other side. He looked beyond the immediate pain to the eternal purpose. That is the model for us. And James goes on to give us another example, Job. In 5 verse 11, James says, "As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." Job didn't have all the answers. He struggled, but he held on. And in the end, he saw that the Lord was full of compassion and mercy. Job's story reminds us that even when we cannot see the purpose of our pain, God is still good. His character is unchanging, and his compassion never fails. Think also about Paul. He was beaten, imprisoned, shipwrecked, and betrayed. And yet, he could write from prison in Philippians 4 verse 4, which says, "Rejoice in the Lord. Always, I will say it again, rejoice." That is patience. That is hopeful endurance, rooted in trust that Christ is near. Patience is hopeful endurance grounded in the belief that God is faithful, that Christ is coming, and that our present suffering is not the end of the story. So far, we've seen that trials shape us now, and patience sustains us for the future. But there's a third truth that we can't miss. Hope strengthens us in the present. Without hope, trials feel crushing. Without hope, waiting feels endless. But with hope, we find strength to keep going day by day. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16 to 18, "Therefore, we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Hope changes our perspective. It teaches us to measure life not by what is temporary, but by what is eternal. And in Psalms chapter 27, verse 13, it goes on to say, "I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." That is hope in the present. Not waiting for heaven, but believing God's goodness breaks into our lives, even now. And then we move on to Revelation, which gives us the ultimate picture of hope. And in Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, it reads as follows: "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." I'll read that again. "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." That's the future hope that strengthens our present endurance. Every trial has an expiration date. Every tear will one day be wiped away. Hope is confidence in God's promises. Hope looks at trials and says, "This will not last forever. My God is faithful, and he will bring me through." So what do these passages teach us? Trials, they shape us now. They refine our faith. They strip away what is shallow and weak and build perseverance. Patience sustains us for the future. It teaches us to keep trusting, to keep waiting, to keep hoping until Christ returns. And hope strengthens us in the present. It lifts our eyes above the storm and reminds us God is in control. All three of these are essential for a mature faith. And Paul ties us together beautifully in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17, where he says, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." From our perspective, the trouble doesn't always feel light, and it doesn't always feel momentary. But when we compare it to eternity, it is. What God is working in us through trials, patience, and hope is far greater than the weight of suffering we carry. I want to leave you off this evening just with the illustration. I want you to think of a tapestry. On the back side of it, what you see are all these knots, tangles, and loose threads. It looks messy and it doesn't make sense. But when you turn it over, you see this beautiful pattern that this artist has been weaving all along. Our lives are like that. From where we stand, the trials look messy, they look meaningless, and they don't really make sense. But God sees the other side. He's weaving a masterpiece for his glory. So the call for us is this: embrace the trial because it shapes you. Embrace patience because it sustains you. Embrace hope because it strengthens you. And above all, remember, the Lord is near. Thank you.